Things move on. Life progresses. It's cumulative. And I would see people as shapes. Sometimes they look like people. Sometimes they look like just shadows. This craft took up about 70 degrees of that 90 degrees. That's how big it was. It was massive. I couldn't make my kids' last moments on Earth any more pleasant, but maybe I could make it for somebody else's kids. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. I just retired last year after 4 decades as a registered nurse. And I started out nursing. I worked high-risk labor and delivery, OBGYN, and I saw many, many people into the world.
Wow.
I later became a hospice nurse for 17 years. 5 of those years I did pediatric hospice. It was almost always inpatient. And then I saw people out of the world. So I got to see, both sides of life in this same incredible career. Totally blessed that I went to nursing school, and it was absolutely the best decision I could have made. I later did pediatric burn. I did pediatric emergency room and then level 1 trauma emergency room. And now I'm retired and sleep in till noon.
How do you like being retired?
Oh my gosh, it's better than what I thought it was going to be. I had all these plans. I'm going to go here, there, and everywhere. I haven't done anything. I was going to clean up the house and go through boxes. Haven't done anything. I just enjoy relaxing.
That's good. That's good. As long as you're doing what you want to be doing right now, I think that's the important thing, right?
That's it. I paid my dues.
We'll get into that for sure. Yeah. I think we'll do that a little bit. I was curious, what got you into nursing? You said you went to nursing school, and we're jumping ahead slightly, but again, there's not really a lot of structure here. But had you always thought that you wanted to head in that direction, or did you do a career change, or what did that look like for you?
I never thought I'd want to do that. I was a hairdresser for a while, and I loved doing that. I didn't make a whole lot of money, but it was a lot of fun. It was very creative. It's one of the few careers, along with nursing, where you actually get to touch your client or your patient. And you got that connection with people. And as a hairdresser, if you're spending 2 hours doing a perm with somebody, you got to keep a conversation going. So I really learned to open up and talk to people. It really brought me out because I was raised on a farm out in the middle of nowhere. It's my grandmother, me, and a bunch of chickens and cows. So, working in a salon, it gave me good communication skills with people, and also the dexterity with my fingers, doing perms and messing with hair. I became very, very good starting IVs too, and doing dressing changes because I had developed the nimbleness with my fingers. Things move on. Life progresses. It's cumulative. What you do now, who knows what skills that you learn now that you're going to use in 20, 30, 40 years. And both careers were absolutely a blessing to me. But I used to do a lot of nurses' hair. And I used to do this one woman, her hair. She was a retired World War II nurse. And the story she told me, it just filled her, working. She was in France, and the soldiers were blasted away, and there was no hospital. They just did it outside in the streets in the dirt. And she took care of the soldiers, and the love and the memory of the stories from the memories that she had inspired me so much. It was like, I'm going to nursing school.
Okay. Wow. And I'm sorry if I missed it, but how long ago, or roundabouts, how old were you when you decided to go into that?
I was in my mid to late 20s when I decided to become a nurse. So I was still pretty young. I was not that good of a student. I mean, it's like I got through high school. So I thought, what am I going to do?
I wasn't either. So
I go to college. So there was this class, it was a big group called Silva Mind Control. Have you ever heard of it? It was big in the 1960s, 70s. It's still around. It's now called the Silva Method. And it's a 4-day meditation class on how to center your thoughts and how to think of one thing at a time. And they also teach you on the 4th day a psychic ability. I mean, you're actually doing a remote viewing on the 4th day. I took that so that I could get through school, and it truly opened up my intuition and my ability to see and perceive and feel. And that's so valuable as a nurse, because sometimes a lot of our patients, especially our hospice patients, can't talk. They can't say that they're in pain or something. And as an intuitive nurse, I could be down the hall and tell if they're in pain or not, or if they needed repositioned, or if they needed cleaned, or whatever that they needed. And it was right 100% of the time. So anyway, Silva Mind Control, I got great grades in school using their techniques. And also, again, here's this cumulative effect of the skills that you learn. And you just continue to use those tools again and again throughout your life. I still take the classes 40 years later. I'm still involved in it.
Backtracking a little bit, you said that you grew up on a farm, or were you on a farm? You grew up like throughout your whole childhood, or were you kind of visiting, or what was kind of that like growing up there?
My parents were in college, and it was really hard to raise a child. So I stayed with my mother's mother, who had a small farm in southern Ohio. We had no plumbing. We had a well in the backyard. If you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to go out the kitchen door, across the yard, down a hill, and we had an outhouse. We had chickens in the yard, cornfields on either side of the house. Across the road was dairy cattle. That was all our land. My grandmother was too old to raise, cows herself, but she let the neighbors have their cows pasture on our farm. So it was on a dirt road out in way southern Ohio, Athens County, and it was just me and my grandmother. Very often it would just be Rex, and this red Chevrolet would drive by, Chevrolet pickup truck, and he was the mailman. And that's the only people we would see very often. It was just him. You hear somebody coming down the road, and we'd run outside, watch the car go by, and then go back in the house. That was our thrill. I mean, we didn't have a grocery store. It was like 30 miles away. So we had to rely on either if my parents had time on a weekend, they'd bring groceries, or some of the neighbors would pick us up or and take us into town to get that. I had to take a bus. It was very rural. Sure. And so I was raised, by early childhood. Finally, my parents graduated and became school teachers, and I got to move to a small a farming community also, but it was, at least it had plumbing and a city and a town and, stores. So it was definitely a step up from the farm, but a step down from a real city. It was a lovely place to grow up. Probably one of my earliest occurrences, and this I did sit on almost my entire life for over 60 years. Until just last year. I told my grandmother about it, and she took it very seriously. But let me tell you what happened. Early in the morning, first thing we do, we go out to the barn, we let the chickens out, and the chickens run around the yard all day. So it was a quiet morning, probably early morning. I was probably about 5 years old, so this would have been late 1950s. My grandmother was inside. I'm on the porch. The chickens are running around. And all at once, the chickens just absolutely freaked out and ran. Some ran into the corn right next to the house. Some ran under the house. Some ran out into the road. Some ran over to the field to the where the cows were. I mean, they just took off. And it's like, well, something's up. That alerted me. And I was sitting on the porch. I was looking around, what scared them so badly? And chickens aren't chicken. I mean, we would get snakes in the yard, and chickens go up and they'll peck it to death. And we had feral dogs coming, and the chickens would attack them and protect me. this was totally different. So I was alarmed, and I looked around the side of the house, and up walking towards me is a stuffed Easter bunny. And maybe from the bottom to the head was about 2 feet and a foot of ears, and it looked like a stuffed toy. It wasn't like animated, and it was kind of dirty. It had a little yellow bow around its neck, and the bow was soiled and wrinkled, and it was kind of leaning off to one side and just kind of walking like somebody had their hand behind it and was moving it like to play with a kid. Oh, here comes the Easter bunny. But there was nothing behind it. And it was maybe, this far off the ground, floating and coming towards me. I'm thinking, what the heck is this? I'm a kid, but I knew this isn't normal.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I'm it's like, what are you? I didn't say anything, but I just, it's what I'm thinking. And I can't remember if it was an actual voice or it just came in my mind, but it started talking to me. And it said that it needed help. It needed me to go with it and help it do something. And if I would go with it, it would we could have some great adventures. And come with me. And I probably would have done it because I'm lonesome. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I had no playmates, but it scared the chickens. And I was enough of a farm boy to know something's going on. So I didn't go with them. I said, no, I'm not going with you. If you need some help, ask your friends something.
Wow.
And it kept trying to get me to go with it. Come on. I really need your help. Help me. Come with me. You're going to love it. Come on. We'll have a good time. I refused to go. And I backed up on the porch. It's like, I don't trust this situation. And as I backed up on the porch, there was a corner to the house, and I couldn't see it anymore. And I thought, waited a few minutes, and I thought, So I took a few steps forward and leaned around the corner of the house, and it had turned around and was walking away. And again, kind of wobbling like something's holding it. But this time I could see what was behind it. I saw the back of what looked like a used, dirty, soiled Easter bunny stuffed toy. But what was behind it, it looked like a 2-foot, fat, squatty dinosaur with 4 legs and a tail dragging on the ground. And it looked like maybe its snout or its head was stuck in the back of the Easter bunny. Someone later told me maybe it was morphing between shapes or something. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it's like, oh, what the heck is that? And I watched it walk around the corner of the house and disappear. And I ran in and got my grandmother, and I told her what happened. She totally believed me. Ran out of the house, had her gun. We always had guns all over the place, and ran around the house. She was a hillbilly, and didn't see anything. I don't know if there was tracks in the ground or what. I don't remember that. But I stayed in the house for like a week after that. I was too scared. It was an hour or so later before the chickens started coming back. That was my proof that this wasn't my imagination. They saw something, and they saw it before I did.
Sure.
So I all my life I've sat on this. I thought, what the heck was that? I've had many, many spirit experiences. I've had one UFO experience. I've had a couple experiences with non-human beings that I ran into on camping trips. But, what was this? So finally last October of 2022, I went to my very first UFO conference. It's called UFO Congress or something. It was here in Arizona. And I went to the experiencers meeting, and 2 people stood up and told my story. The same thing happened to them.
Oh, wow.
And it was both the Easter bunny, except theirs was animated like a cartoon character. And they kept trying to get them to come with them, come on. And they were terrified and wouldn't go with them. And I thought, wow. So for the first time in over 60 years, I told my story publicly there too, because I was the third person. I stood up and I said, that same thing happened to me. And it was interesting that they had been in Ohio too. It's much more recent than my experience. They were much younger than I was. So a few months later, I thought, I'm just going to be bold and adventuresome. And I put my story on a Reddit group about beings enticing children, taking on the forms of cartoon characters. I got like 200 replies, and I spoke to 36 people that had the exact same thing happen to them. But it was the cartoon character that would have been popular at their age. The cowboy.
Oh, Toy Story.
Toy Story, that's it.
Okay, yeah.
Another one was Ninja Turtles. One said it was Captain Crunch and would come up to them and try to get them to go. Not one of them went with the beings. But 36 had the same thing. And it's like, what is going on with this? I just recently heard from a woman, and it was Santa Claus. And she did go. She was the only one that I've ever talked to that did go with him. Wow. And the weird thing was she would get in the sleigh, but instead of jumping in the back of the sleigh like how Santa would, with all the toys and the elves, there was a door in the back of the sleigh, and she would have to slide through the door like a hatch. And without hearing my story, she said that when Santa would turn around, he was a dinosaur with a green-brown tail that dragged on the ground, exactly like what I saw in probably 1958, 1959.
Was it like a popular kind of doll you had seen, or was it just kind of a generic Easter bunny and that was your sort of popular thing?
It was interesting. And after, I really think maybe I should really focus on this and interview all of these people that contacted me, because I don't think anybody's doing this. There's a show Spielberg did called Taken. It was like a 2 or 3 parter in 2002 or 2003. And there's a clip in there where an animated squirrel comes and gets somebody and takes them to a hollow tree, and the tree turns into a ship and off they go. And someone from this group I got goosebumps again.
Wow.
Told me about that. And I found on YouTube, I found the clip of that. Being out in the middle of nowhere, to get clothes, people would drive by and they would put out sacks of used clothes for us because we looked so desperate. It's my grandmother and I. And then they drive off. And once they drive off, we'd go through and there would be my clothes I'd have or an old dirty toy or something. Everything was used. Or people would just drop off food and then drive off. And we had a TV, we got one channel. And we could barely, get much of anything. This is Southern Ohio. So mostly we got West Virginia stations. So I wasn't exposed to a lot of cartoons. So it seems like it appeared to me what a poor kid on a dirt road with no plumbing would find normal. And that was a soiled, used, stuffed toy. A brand new, pretty toy. I wouldn't know I had never seen anything like that. So, my toys were all from like my parents had back in the 40s. It's interesting. Whatever these things are, they know what the kid would find as normal or would be drawn to, and they take on that shape. What do they want? Why do they need our permission? I mean, whatever they are, they could have grabbed us. Wherever it came from, it could have grabbed me and ran off with me. For whatever reason, it needed my permission.
Your grandmother's awesome because I love how she ran out with a gun, and I mean, but I think you're right that would be treated with the normal, oh, it's just your imagination, go back to work, son, kind of thing. But had she mentioned experiencing anything similar in her past, or you said she took it seriously? Did she have any indication like, hey, I've kind of know what that might be, or what did that look like?
If she did, she didn't tell me. I was a kid, and she probably, if she had an inkling, she might have been afraid of frightening me.
Gotcha.
But she did tell me. She says, if it ever comes back, whatever you do, don't go with it.
Sure.
I had so many things happen to me that she was aware of. I probably wish I would have, interviewed her. She died ages ago. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
I don't know, but what a bizarre thing to happen. I
I
think,
absolutely. That is.
what, yeah. And I sat on it for 60 years because I thought, it's not a ghost. It's an
Yeah.
Easter bunny. It's an Easter bunny slash dinosaur. I knew nothing about UFOs. And I didn't know anything about MUFON until just a couple years ago. And, and as a nurse, I worked every weekend for decades because I like to go camping. So we generally worked 3 12-hour shifts. So I'd work like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I had the whole week off to go camping where everybody else was at work. So if I went camping, it was just me.
Yeah.
And that was a great payoff, but I missed out going to so many events and taking so many classes and symposiums and things. So, maybe if I had attended more, I would have understood more. But, thank goodness I was drawn to take this class or to take this UFO convention. I had just retired, decided I'm going to start saying yes more and going to events more. And
I like it.
how wonderful those people that first spoke up about the Easter Bunny, because I wouldn't have said a word, but they took the first step, and that changed my life. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. Now that I'm retired, is who cares what people think? They
Yeah.
can't be fired. I'm retired.
Now, again, I'm sorry if I missed it, but when this symposium that you shared the story with, that was maybe not that long ago, right?
A year this month.
That's okay, yeah. And isn't it funny how after everything that you would have seen and experienced, right, up until then, that there still would have been something kind of you were holding on, like, oh well, maybe like what will people say or
Mhm.
what was it kind of thing. And so I think it's really great that you found a place where you could share that. So,
But it took those people to have the nerve and the ability to speak and tell their own truth. Because I was going to tell something else that had happened to me, but they said my story, and it was like thank you so much. So when people have a story to share, no matter how crazy it may sound, you have no idea what good you're doing for someone else by telling your truth. Just stand there and tell your truth. And if people criticize you, don't hang around those people anymore. Find your tribe that loves you and
yep,
uplifts you and supports you and says, thank you for telling me that. Those are your people.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
I stay in touch with one of them now. And I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you for telling me, for opening the door for me. There was a cemetery not too far from us, and I used to go there. We get a ride to go there. My grandmother wanted to clean up my grandfather's grave. I would kind of wander around and play around the headstones. And there was this guy had died in 1920. And very often when I would go see his grave, I didn't know who he was. I would see him laying on top of the grave, like a completely solid person. And his hair was part of the middle, kind of slicked back. Red cheeks. Probably they used some old rouge or something to make him look natural. Weathered boots, black pants, black jacket with one button, and a white shirt. And I would see him every now and then. And I would see people, shapes. Sometimes they looked like people. Sometimes they looked like just shadows standing to be the left side of headstones, maybe about 20% of the headstones. And I would tell my grandmother, and she would just say, well, just, let him be, wave hi to him, and, they're not going to hurt you. She didn't shame me at all.
Yeah.
He was probably seeing him too and just didn't want to say anything. We had something that happened at least 50 times, and my grandmother knew it beforehand almost every single time. And it usually happened late in the afternoon, early evening. And my grandmother would say, they're coming. They're coming. Get ready. Go get on the porch. We had a porch swing. hurry up, go get on the porch. I'll be right out. And she'd fix her hair and put her teeth in and put some lipstick on and, kind of make herself look a little more presentable than a, country farm woman. And we'd run out there and get on the swing and we'd wait. And we were halfway down a small hill, and then there was a creek in our barn, and then we'd go up over another hill, gravel road, and pretty soon we'd hear some voices, and we'd hear people kicking up the rocks as they'd walk down the hill. And here would come about 30 or so Civil War soldiers. They were all in blue. Some had guns, most didn't. They looked like they had been shot up. Their uniforms were torn. Some of them just had their jackets open, walking 2 or 3 or 4 in a group. Some were by themselves. They would kind of scatter off, and eventually just all of them would walk by. And as a kid, and they looked young. They looked like teenagers, maybe early 20-year-olds. And as a kid, I thought, playmates. I'm lonesome. So I would run up to the edge of the gravel road and say, you want to come in? We got one channel. Grandma will fix you something. And, but they never hurt me. They never responded to me. They looked 100% solid. I had no idea that they were spirit. I thought they were, flesh and blood young men. I didn't understand what the Civil War was. I was just a kid. And this would have been late 1950s into early 1960s. And this happened again and again and again. And they'd walk by and they would be talking to each other. And I could clearly hear their voices. But for whatever reason, I couldn't understand the words that they were saying. And I was so close to them. And something just told me not to touch them. That would have been polite. But right now I can shut my eyes. I can clearly see some of them's faces. And I just thought,
Wow.
play with me, talk to me, interact. But they didn't. And they'd walk and walk. And then there'd be a few stragglers. And they'd walk down and go over the tiny bridge, go over the little creek, and they'd disappear behind the barn and then up over the hill, and they would be gone. And my grandmother said, well, let's go in and have some supper. And that was it. We watched them and go in and, didn't really talk about it. But this happened again and again and again. And at nights in the summer, we'd have screens in the windows. And at night, I could hear them too. Sometimes I'd wake up because I'd hear their foots kicking the rocks in the gravel road. And then I could hear their voices, and they would walk by. It was like the same thing over and over and over again. And I felt so lonesome for them. I felt so sad for them. It's like, you guys where are you going? When are you going to get there? Where did you come from? And later, my parents graduated and I left the farm and I haven't been back. But decades later, I was watching a documentary on the Civil War. And they said that after the war was over and there was a lot of Union soldiers still down in the South, there was no way to get them home because, the horses were shot, the roads were blown up, the railroad was destroyed. The boats were sunk. So the only way for soldiers to get home pretty much was walk. And that was hundreds or 1,000 miles. And sometimes, people would come and try to meet their loved ones along the way and wait for them and just watch this trail of soldier boys trying to get back home. And it said that many of the soldiers that survived the war did not survive the walk home.
Wow.
And that kind of hit me, is that what happened to these boys? Are they still trying to get home after, it was 95, 100 years later? And I still feel very sad for them. I keep thinking now I should go back. I don't know if the house is still there, but I would know where the location was. I wonder if I could still see those boys. I'd love to. I sent them an emotional hug still to this day. And I just pray somehow, they find home, wherever home is. That was a wonderful experience to see, and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my grandmother knew it. She knew when it was going to happen. How?
That's interesting. And I guess you were too young at that point to kind of think about the questions to ask, right? Because you were just a kid and you probably didn't really know fully what was happening, and only
I just
later.
thought they were boys. Yeah.
Right.
But they did the same thing over and over and over again. And I remember she said, they're from the Civil War, and there they go. And she got herself ready. She made herself presentable. And I think now, looking at that time, she wanted to show them respect.
Yeah.
That was her way of doing that. And she wanted to share it with me. And there was no fear of it. There's no fear of the deceased. She was very in tune with spirit. What a wonderful experience it was, growing up with her. And I see where my mom got it. My mom was open to it too, and so was my dad. I was really fortunate to grow up.
It sounds like it already. Like your grandmother just sounds awesome. I'm a fan. I'm a fan already. On your channel, I saw that and I was like, that is incredible. And I had all these questions to ask, but you kind of answered all the questions. One of my questions was going to be, were they translucent? Could you see? It's like, no, they looked very solid, right? But you could.
Very solid, and their uniforms. Interesting. I mean, they were thick. They were nice uniforms, but all shot up and torn, and there was holes in them and big gaps in them and tears in the trousers. And
Wow.
They definitely had wear and tear. And so I don't know, where did they die on their way home? Did they die in battle? I don't know where, but they couldn't find home. Why? Why couldn't they find home after all that time? So,
Wow.
60 years later, I still send those boys love. I just send love and peace and light. And I hope they're happy wherever they are. I hope they found home.
How did you end up in Phoenix? What exactly kind of brought you to Phoenix? Which I guess will take us to another, event of a different type. But how did you end up and how long have you been in Phoenix?
Gosh, I came out in the 70s. And eventually I moved up to Columbus, Ohio, which was, the capital. And then my friends were all moving out to Arizona. And I was like, finally, I don't have any friends left. They're all in Arizona. So they moved out to Sedona. And we had my mom took me to everything. Anything that was weird or spiritual or psychic, we went to. Took me out of school and off we went. And we went to mediums and healers. Jim Jones's church, the People's Temple in Indiana, from Jonestown. She took me there when he was still in Indiana. And then we moved off to California and then went off to Guyana and killed everybody. My mom would drive me over to that and healers. And there was the last 4 Shakers left on the planet from the Shaker religion from the 1870s, 1880s. It was pretty big.
Yeah.
And there was 4 of them left, and they were in their 90s. And there was an article in the newspaper, and my mom traced them down, and we got invited. We went up to Cleveland, and I got to meet the very last Shakers on the planet. My mom took me to all this stuff, but we got involved in a group called Ekankar, which is a form of Surat Shabda yoga, which practices listening to the audible life, the light and the sound of the universe, and having out-of-the-body experiences. So I was raised in that and just being open to these. I guess it was New Age at the time.
Sure.
But I had a lot of friends, and everybody was moving to Sedona, Arizona, because the Ekankar owned some property there. And I thought, well, I miss them. So I moved to Arizona. And what a great adventure that was. And I've met so many wonderful people here. But I think when you focus on truth and you focus on light and you focus on what's the betterment for you and for the world in general, you're going to draw people towards you that are your tribe, no matter where you are. I'm sure I would have, found more absolutely loving, wonderful, uplifting people if I stayed in Ohio. But I love Arizona. I've been here ever since. And that's when I decided, to become a nurse. And uh, completely changed my career and my focus and opened up new paths to experiences. Um, when I was a hospice nurse for 17 years, there was an AIDS crisis was going on at the time.
Right.
And back then it was a death sentence.
This would have been, just for anyone, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this would have been, would have started like the late 80s and would have been really
right.
at its height, kind of like in the early 90s,
Early
late
90s.
80s, early 90s. Yeah.
So around 1990, 1991, somewhere around like that, nurses were allowed to decline taking care of AIDS patients. They said it was against their religion. These people got what they deserved and let them die. So the rest of us that would take them, we would have like a double patient load. And there was no real treatment. I mean, what do you do? The whole government was just dragging its feet on this whole thing at the time. So somebody got together and they opened up an old closed down nursing home. And it had been closed for years. And of course, it came with its own ghosts in it, big deal. And we started with one patient and we ended up with a 55-bed unit. And we had everything going on. They had dance classes. They had a clinic. They had everything that they could to try to get the community to accept us and to leave us alone. On the nursing side, I was the night charge nurse. And it was just an amazing, wonderful, powerful place to be because all of the patients, almost all of them, were very, very young, and they knew they were there to die. And we did everything that we absolutely could for them. Right. But as they would die off, it was their own people dying, and our patients would cluster together and support and uplift each one of them. I tried to do what I could as a nurse, but I wasn't a member of that club. That only they were understanding that experience. Somehow we got this nurse came from Colorado, and I don't know if she had just come from Colorado and this was her first job in Arizona or not, but wonderful lady. She and I worked together for a long time. I was the RN, she was an LPN, and then we would have a nursing assistant or two at night, and we just ran. And she and I became really good friends. And after a while, she just broke down. She goes, "I got to tell you something." And, she got to tell you why I'm here from Denver. And, sure, what happened? She was a nurse in Denver, and her boyfriend, the love of her life, was doing some sort of construction work. Now, this is third hand. I did not know the boyfriend. I never saw the area. I'm quoting what she told me. So this is not my experience. I'm telling it as best as I can recall, which is pretty darn accurate.
Sure.
So anyway, he was doing some construction work. He was working where she said was underneath the Denver airport. He was doing something. He had a designated area that he was supposed to be and not be anywhere else. Something happened. He wandered off and got lost. He went down huge hallways with very wide and very tall with huge doors. And he was, why is everything so big? And as he wanders down, one door was open a little bit. So he went inside, and it was a washroom, a restroom, except it just had toilets in stalls. And he said that the top of each toilet was about 6 feet tall, that the toilet itself was massive, about a 6 foot tall toilet in each one of the stalls. Huh. And he couldn't even see the top. He had to kind of stand back. He could kind of see that the lid was down. And then there was a counter opposite where the toilets were. And he went against the opposite wall. He could look at it, and it was a faucet where you'd wash your hand. There was no mirror in front of it like most restrooms would have. And he just wondered, why is this so big? It's just this huge toilets and a huge sink. What's going on? And then security comes in and gets him. He gets in a lot of trouble. And they say, you know, you're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be there. And they take him back to his area. And finishes his shift. He goes home. She's home. He tells her what's happening. And, I think, well, this is weird. Hope you don't get in trouble. The next day, she goes to work. And when she gets home, he's not there. And generally, he's there before she is. She waits around for him. He doesn't show up. His keys are there. His keys are still in the apartment where they live. And he doesn't show up. And she calls his family, and they haven't seen him. And, days go by, and they report him as a missing person. And no one's seen him. His Jeep was found out of town, abandoned. And how it got there, because the keys are still in the apartment. Left his dog, left his clothes, left everything. And she waited for a year for him to come back, because this is her soulmate. This is the man that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. This is her, her honey. And she was terrified. What happened? Did it have anything to do with, what he had seen the day before? And she was telling me this because she's mourning the loss of the love of her life. Not that she's into giant toilets or anything, but it was just kind of incidental. And she told me this multiple times, and would just, shake and cry and mourn this man. And he never showed up. No one ever saw him again. And she told it to several of us that worked there, and I've told it to several people. But it wasn't until, recently, when I'm starting to really, become a member of the UFO community, that I heard about giants and stuff underground. And then my experience with some beings underground too, which happened later, that really brought this all to reality.
Wow.
Something's going on. And I don't know when the current airport was actually built, but maybe something was built underground first.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. What year would you have guessed this was that she?
I'm going to guess it was probably late 1980s.
Right. Okay.
Because I probably met her in 90 or 91. I don't know how long she had been in Arizona already, but this sounded pretty recent. So it was probably a couple years before. And then she waited a year before she left because she kept thinking he's going to show up. Something's going to happen. She wanted to keep the apartment in case he needed her. One day there's a knock at the door, and there he is. And finally gave up.
And it sounds like he was at least around long enough to tell her, "Hey, listen to this crazy thing that happened." And then not long after, he's gone.
The next day. The next day.
Okay.
That was the night that this happened. He told her what happened. And then the next day she goes to work and never sees him again. I believe, he was leaving for work too. But, how did his keys stay inside? Yeah. How did his car get out and, out of town without the keys? And, did he leave for work and come back? I don't know. There's just too many questions. I mean, she had I can't think of why she would make something like this up. And she told it again and again and again. And she kind of, waited till she opened up to me and knew that I wasn't going to ridicule her. But we were all seeing stuff in this building. First of all, it was, it's an old nursing home, and you used to hear old down hallways where we didn't have patients yet. You would hear old women saying, "Nurse, nurse."
Oh, wow.
And we had young boys were our patients. So it's like, we all knew stuff was going on. And it was interesting. Some of the people weren't used to it. I was. It's like, that's cool.
Yeah.
Hi, where are you? Welcome. I'll take care of you too. So it was a great learning experience for everybody that worked there. And I believe she told it to several other people because, we would talk about things that we saw. It was, so I don't know.
Wow.
Whatever it is, I want to get it out there.
Well, I can consider it. That's great. I feel privileged that it's there, that it's here with us now. Yeah, my small, it won't be small for long. You speak it into existence.
That's right. It's going to draw the people that need to hear what you're saying, what you're presenting.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Whenever you sent me the email, I was just so surprised to see that you were a witness to the Phoenix Lights. And I was like, wow, now that's taking a bit of a jump forward in time, but that's perfectly fine if you don't mind. Kind of,
Sure.
I was definitely wanted to pick your brain about it, because I know there's been lots of documentaries about the Phoenix Lights and speculation. And what was your experience? What did you see? And then maybe the next part would be like, what's your take on everything that kind of came after? Because I don't, or if you've absorbed anything that came after, I don't, depending on how dialed in you were with all the, the politics, I guess, around the afterwards. But you were there. I mean, you were there with the governor and everything. I'm sure you saw all that.
I saw that on TV. That jerk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I had a great learning experience from what the governor did, and I'll go into that. That taught me to never be shamed silent again, because when he came forward and had somebody in the rubber alien suit and said, "Oh, this is what it was," and people started laughing at me because I was at work. I worked at an inpatient hospice unit at the time. I mean, I was a good person. And people said, that's what you were like. That's what you saw, somebody in a rubber suit. And it's
and
like,
thousands of people saw this. This was a mass. This was an utterly, mass event, right? It's
Right.
not just one or two crazy people. It is, okay, if they're crazy, then thousands of people are crazy. So
the night that it happened, I was working day shift at that time. And we had a 10-bed inpatient hospice unit. And this was when I was working just adult hospice. And our average patient, their life expectancy was 72 hours. So we would get people very close to death. And we would lose easily 3 or 4 people a shift. I went through 3,600 deaths in my hospice career that I was outside at, and got to participate and be with those people. I'm going to try to tell this without crying, but I may.
Okay.
So, and I don't make tears anymore. Now that I'm old, it's terrible. To cry, and you don't get the benefit of producing tears. It doesn't heal. My grandmother had the same thing.
I'll just let you go through that process if you do, I'm not trying to be hurt. Yeah, I'm not trying to be heartless. I'll just let you process and let you know
17 years of hospice, I cried constantly. We all did.
Yeah.
With the families and the patients. But anyway, it was we did 12-hour shifts, and the night nurse was a little late, so I didn't get out right on time, which is fine. I lived in Phoenix. I was working in Mesa, Arizona. So we have a big freeway. You got to go from Mesa to Tempe to Phoenix. Getting home. And we had a freeway that was under construction, and it was under construction for like 10 years. I don't know. It takes forever to do anything in Arizona with the road.
Reminds me of Houston.
Oh,
yeah. Same way.
So the whole freeway was dirt. And there was hardly anybody on the freeway. Everybody else but me was smart enough to know to go down the side streets. But I don't know. I took the freeway, and every time we went under an overpass, you ended up having to go over the overpass and then get back down on the freeway. And it was just taking forever. So I was probably out of Mesa into Tempe, Arizona, on my way to Phoenix. I'm going over an overpass because the freeway was closed, and there was this huge mound of dirt. A huge pile. And someone later says I was probably supposed to drive around it, but it was dark and there wasn't a whole lot of light, and I went clear up on top of it. So I'm quite elevated on top of an overpass. And in fact, the houses that would have been to the right of me, I would have just seen their rooftops. So I was above houses, elevated. And there was a nearby streetlight, freeway streetlight. And those things are pretty tall. They're much taller than neighborhood streetlights. And I was about parallel with that streetlight. It was right behind my shoulder, maybe about a foot or two over my head, giving me a lot of light from that when I'm on top of the hill. and I had my truck on and my brights were on. And I'm looking out the window, and there's this huge boomerang shaped craft with lights on the bottom coming towards me. And it was getting dark, but there's still this ambient light from the city, all the city lights kind of shining up. So I could clearly see the outline versus the dark sky. So, I put on my brakes and I jump out of my truck as it's coming up to me. Now, I'm quite elevated in above the road and above rooftops. It was very low. I'm going to guess when it came up to me, it was about 30 feet over my head. I clearly anticipated I could hit it with a rock. And in fact, I thought about it because there's rocks all over me. I'm on a construction hill. And I almost picked one up and hit it because I thought, I wonder what it sounds like. And then I just got this thought, consequences. There could be big consequences of this. So I didn't do it. I was in absolute awe of it. It was, where can you see?
I can
Okay.
I can see your hand. Yep.
Okay. So the if it fell down in front of me, I could take 2 steps and I could have kicked the tip of the left wing. So I was almost exactly underneath the tip of the left wing. So to see it, I had to look straight up.
Oh, wow.
And it was rounded. I see these drawings. I make it a V shape. It wasn't a V. It was a round, beautiful boomerang. And the edges were round. And it was round going up. So it was round horizontal and vertical, the very tip of it. So to see the tip of it, I had to look up 90 degrees, straight up. And then there would be the horizon. So looking straight up on the horizon, that's 90 degrees. This craft took up about 70 degrees of that 90 degrees. That's how big it was. It was massive. And I would estimate a mile wide from tip to tip. Huge. And as it came up over, and I decided not to hit it, with a rock. And
I'm glad you did.
Most of the craft, I did not have to lift my head up. I mean, most people that saw it, they looked up at it. All I had to do was just raise my eyes and I could see the whole thing. That's how close I was to it. I had to look up just to see the tip, but for the rest of the craft, I could just lift my eyes just a little bit, clearly see it. So everybody else that saw it that I've heard so far, saw it going overhead. I'm looking at it horizontally because it's low, I'm elevated, and at the position where I was, I could see the whole darn craft, but the bottom of it. It was all one piece of fabric. There was no bolts, there was no seams, there was no rivets. It was like a gunmetal gray, because I had the street light there shining on it and my headlights on. I could just clearly see it. It was about,
Gotcha.
I would say about 20% reflective and about 80% matte, like a finish to it. And see, that's where hairdressing comes in with color and texture.
Yeah.
Pay attention to things like that.
I love that, and I'm sorry. That's really unique because I think a lot of the testimony, I guess, is they could only see the lights, right? And they couldn't they couldn't see the colors. So you're describing colors, and it was reflective. Wow, that's
because they have all this light, and I'm horizontal to it, and so I saw it at a totally different angle than anybody else did.
Wow,
that I know of. I don't want to put
Sure.
words into somebody else's or discredit anybody else. I can only tell you what I saw. The bottom of it, because I was looking sideways, it was covered in thousands and thousands of oval indentations, like the shape of a thumbprint, probably a couple feet wide because it was up there. I mean, I'm looking at it right now in my mind. Okay.
I can see that. Yep.
Thousands, and they went horizontally from tip towards the inner. I mean, that thing was so big eventually I couldn't see them, but thousands and thousands, and they weren't in a row. They were just kind of scattered all the way around horizontally, going everywhere.
Wow.
The nearest light looked oval, but it was probably round because I'm looking at it horizontally. Something round from a distance looks kind of oval. I could see a little bit inside the light. It wasn't a bulb. It wasn't covered. It was an opening, and maybe a couple inches inside the opening, the far side of the opening, there was a silver ring, like a silver material. It was probably a couple inches thick. And out of that flowed what looked like lava, thick orange crush, orange lava. And it poured down like an upside down lava lamp. It poured down and glowed, and the thick, drippy substance. And as it would pour down, it looked like it would cool. I don't know if it was hot or what, and form like a large drip and stop. And then it would go back up in to the opening of the craft. And while that was happening, more was coming down, and 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 rotating back, up and down, stop, and back, just like lava lamps do. But there was a lot of it was much faster than a lava lamp, but it was thick like that. And as it would drip down, sometimes it would stretch and kind of get thin. And where it got thin, it would be yellow. And I remember as a kid, for a treat, my grandmother would make taffy. And you've probably never had a taffy pull. And
I have. Well,
you're kidding.
I've had saltwater taffy. I haven't had a taffy pole, but I'm familiar with taffy. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And when it cools down, you got to pull it. Otherwise, it turns to a piece of glass.
Right.
So you got to pull it and get the air in it. And when you pull it, the color changes when it gets thin. And that's what this stuff was doing. So it was orange crush orange, but where it would thin out, it was yellow, and it glowed. In a lava lamp, there's a bulb in the base of the lamp, and the lava stuff, whatever that stuff is, it kind of carries the light through it. It reflects the light from the bulb. This stuff itself glowed. So it wasn't like it was carrying light from whatever was inside the craft. And I was scared because I thought, I'm close to it. This looks very, very hot. So for a second or two, I thought, should I get behind my truck and shield myself from heat? Is my hair going to burn? Is there fumes? I'm a nurse. You think about stuff like that. Am I going to burn? Dust in my eyes? Is it going to blow? A lot of dust if it was used for propulsion. I'm close to it's close to the ground, but there was no wind at all. There was no odor at all. There was absolutely no heat. It blew nothing in my eyes. It didn't blow my hair. Absolutely nothing, except just seeing it, just the light and the seeing the bottom of the craft. And I was like, well, so I just stood there and just stared at it. And the other lights, they were much farther. I focused on the closest one because, my concern for my safety. But the other ones were doing it too. This stuff was pouring down and going back up. I have yet to hear one person until recently describe the same thing. And I know people think, well, how come no one else saw that? I don't know, but I saw it horizontally. I'm seeing this craft sideways, not looking up. And, maybe it wasn't doing that when it was going over other people's houses or something. I saw it crystal clear.
So you're looking straight ahead. You're not having to look up. You're looking forward, and there it is in front of you, is what you're saying.
I can see it right now in my eyes, in my mind. And I'm looking at it. This is all I had to do with my eyes to see the bottom of the craft.
Wow.
Other than just see the tip, I had to look up at that. But but I was focused on the nearest light because I thought, this could be dangerous. But it didn't. It didn't. This huge, mile-wide craft. It was like it was so considerate. It didn't zap me. It didn't, burn me. It didn't radiate me. And for days afterwards, I'm looking in the mirror and checking, make sure I don't have radiation burns or, singed or whatever.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no negative effects. And as it went over, this is tough. As it went overhead and it was heading south, I'm heading from east to west, and it was going from north to south. So it was heading down south, probably towards Chandler, Arizona. There was behind it, it looked like something out of Disneyland. It was this colorful, multi-layered mist of twinkling colored light, and it just flowed like a fish's tail in the air. And somebody in Prescott, Arizona, had a computer generation of what they saw, and it was the exact same thing that I saw. And almost everybody else that I've talked to or heard of doesn't mention this, but he and I saw the same thing. When that went over my head, I just started crying, and I cried for like 10 minutes. It was like my feeling, and I don't know if the craft did something to me or if I did something to myself. I don't know. It was like the best friends I ever had in my life just went by and said hi. Just wanted to, touch him and let you know I'm thinking of you. It was like that. That was the feeling I had. And I was overwhelmed with so much gratitude. That's the best thing I can say. Absolute love and gratitude. And generally I'd cry at this point. And I've spoken locally and I just start crying. I don't know. That discredits me to so many people because they're so analytical. I feel things. And especially from this moment on, my personality changed. It was like something in my head kind of turned like a quarter of an inch. It's like a little something ticked. Something changed in me. And I watched it flying south completely silently in those little waves of whatever that stuff was. And it didn't smell, and it didn't have any, I didn't feel any mist on me, anything. And as it went out of sight, I just stood there, just tears pouring down my face, and just pure 100% gratitude.
Wow. It
changed me 24 hours a day for the 26 years after that. And I was a hospice nurse. You got to be a nice person to be a hospice nurse anyway. But I would have my times on the road in driving and honk, and people weren't going fast enough, and I had some road rage.
Sure.
From that moment that thing finished going over my head, and whatever those wavy things were, I have not honked my horn once. Maybe something needs to move or something, but not in anger, not to speed. I've never sped. I let people cut in line with me in the road. I didn't do that back then. I don't get angry. I don't get upset. People in the grocery store, I let them cut in line. For over a quarter of a century, since that moment, something completely changed in my personality. And I've just become a kinder, happier, more wonderful person through my entire life. And my coworkers noticed it. My friends noticed it. My friends said, if I get any nicer, they can't stand me. And what a nice thing to say. So I don't know what happened. It was 100% positive experience, being that close and getting to see that craft. And it was just weird how I don't know if it was coincidence or I don't know. I don't want to read into it too much, but the night shift person is never late. And I was in the best place I could possibly be to have front row seats 30 feet from a mile wide craft, just gently meandering in the sky, taking its time.
Wow.
Who was flying it? Who had their foot on the pedal? Who had their hand on the steering wheel? I have no idea. But that was absolutely probably the most beautiful experience I've had in my entire life. And it stays with me. And, I live home alone. I sit here at night and I'm just smiling. And I've done that ever since. I'm just happy. I'm not crazy or anything, but I'm just complete. I'm just happy. It's just a very content. I think I've been more in tune, even with my patients after that, more focused. I can't explain it. And I've not talked to anybody else that had that wonderful experience from this.
Interesting.
No one was harmed, but most people were, impressed by it. But recently, I was talking to somebody, and I think I scared him off. He didn't mean to. He was a military pilot in Canada at the time in 1997, March 1997, when this happened. And he said the same night there was a craft just like that in Canada. And he was flying, and he saw it sideways, horizontally too. And he said he saw the lava dripping down and going back up. And he didn't report it because he didn't want to get in trouble, lose his license. He's now a commercial pilot. And I said, my God, could we just talk? Can we just share stories? And then that was the end of it. I haven't heard from him. It's like,
wow,
what was that? I don't know. I don't know what the lava was, because if it was propulsion, you would think our definition of propulsion, it would be pushing stuff away.
Sure. Yeah.
No. But
I'm more fascinated with the blue, kind of atmospheric, I think how you described it, that was following that you saw and affected you.
It looked like something right out of Disneyland, because it was like rainbow colored in layers and sparkly. And
it was like a mist.
A little flag. It was pretty. It was actually.
Oh, okay.
Because every year here in Phoenix, this is news again every March, and we have an event every year commemorating it. In the last couple of years, since I recently found out about MUFON and UFO investigations, I've been a speaker. There's a TV show called UFO Witness with Ben Hansen.
Right.
He did an episode on the Phoenix Lights, and I'm in it. Season 1, episode 5, and they hire an actor to reenact what I saw. And they had the indentations wrong on the bottom of the craft, but you can see the glow on this actor's face, and that was the right color. That was the glow that was on my face.
Wow. That's
that was
that is an experience. Just really quick, like what was your sense of everything that kind of happened after, like with it being in the news, and were you surprised, like, oh, lots of people saw maybe what I saw, or was what you saw like the mass event, or did you kind of see something sort of different? Because I think there were a few sightings around that time, right?
From what I heard, there's Dr. Lynn Kitai, who has like dedicated her life since then to studying this, and she's done a documentary and books. There were multiple craft seen that night from western New Mexico across Arizona into eastern California. She described it as a UFO parade, and just this one craft went over Phoenix. And from Dr. Kitai, talking to different military people, she said that there was another craft that didn't go over cities, that was pretty much over desert, that a pilot told her he estimated was 8 miles wide. Oh, wow. I did not see that. This came from her and all her investigation. Yeah. She's a wonderful physician. So years later, I took care of a guy who was a ranger on the Navajo reservation in northern Arizona. And somehow we got to talking about this. And he said that 2 nights prior to the Phoenix Lights, which was March 13th, 1997, he said on their land in northern Arizona that there were multiple craft flying all over the reservation and on the mesas, which is like a flat hill at a distance. Some of them would land, and he could see people get out and do something with the craft and get back in. He said his next door neighbors pulled their living room furniture out and put it in the yard so they could sit there and watch the craft.
Oh,
But there were
wow.
so many.
Yeah.
And he said that, that he was a sheriff for the nation. And I think he's gone now. But he said that they discussed, what should we do about this? And they decided not to report it because they're feeling this. They're a part of the spiritual flow of it.
Yeah.
And they were enjoying, to them, this was a wonderful blessing. It was a wonderful blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it was. I don't know who it was. I don't know where it came from. Everybody's got an idea. I keep it at facts. I had a wonderful sighting, an incredible feeling, and a life-changing, warming love in my heart and my soul that has not diminished now in 26 years.
It's interesting watching your videos and then just talking to you. I could tell, like, this guy has a very unusual, unusual is maybe a bad word, but just a very unique, upbeat demeanor, and it's infectious. So it's like that. A really good thing about that is, because you are the way that you are, you can model the way for others and spread that for others too. So I think that's a really cool thing.
Every step, it's a baby step up. Every day in every way, take a little baby step up, a little baby step forward. You can't stagnate. If you stagnate, you're actually going backwards. So you always got to just keep going forward and going forward. It was 1989, and I was actually losing probably the best friend I ever had at the time. Also, he had a terminal disease, and I was supporting him. And I was a nurse and working full time. My boys were 7 and 9 years old, and their mother had cancer, and she had died. I had cared for her. And my best friend. I'm going to probably. Okay. Try not to cry.
This is why I was tentative about bringing it up, because I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I
don't want to go into the ground and take my stories with me. I want to leave them behind because, again, who knows that this might help. So she died. So I have my 2 boys. My best friend dies. And I just did a video on him. Hopefully a friend of mine's editing it. That's going to come out. That was absolutely an incredible experience because he came back. And I think he gave me a warning about what was coming with my boys. Because he kept telling me when he came back. Well, that's on. Hopefully it'll be on the video. Hopefully it'll be out this week. So anyway, I was home, single parent, 2 boys. The boys were playing in the front yard. And I hear this noise, and it's like, wow, what was that? Like a huge bang, and neighbors are screaming. And what's going on? And so I go outside. My boys were playing in the front yard, and there's a car in the front yard, and the doors are open, and there's all this red. There's just red everywhere. And I'm thinking, what's that? And neighbors are running up, and I'm just standing there and just kind of frozen. It's like, nothing was making sense. And I'm a nurse. I should have picked up. I was probably just in denial there for a few seconds. And it ends up the red was the blood of my boys. Someone chose to drink and drive and just went clear into the yard and killed my 7 and 9 year old. And I was absolutely helpless and useless at that time. Thank goodness for my wonderful neighbors. And they're trying to drag him out from underneath the car. Here is this drunk who's just totally oblivious to what happened. And, they were dead. And Mom had died. My best friend had just died. And my boys are gone. And luckily the neighbors I didn't really know. So, my God, they were so supportive and helped me and made phone calls and got a hold of some in-laws who came and did the best they could. They were not. Um, they did what they could. They did what they could, and we got through the funeral. And I called up my boss, and I can't come into work, and it should take as much time as you need. That was fine. And I froze. I absolutely froze for a solid year. I stayed in the house, and I didn't go anywhere. So I say this was 1989. So I would look out the window every now and then, see people walking down the street and cars driving by, having their normal life. And it's like, what on earth are you doing? The world froze. The world stopped. Why are you living your lives? Because my world stopped. So I had some paint in the house, and I painted over the windows. I painted out. I painted out the world. I painted out life. I painted out light. I was in total darkness, and I just painted and painted, and I didn't leave the house for a year. And my wonderful friends came and, instead of yelling at me or saying, you got to straighten up and this isn't healthy, they just brought food and said, yeah, how you doing? You doing okay? And, I'd order pizza, and I sat in the house for a solid year. Luckily, I had savings so I could make a house payment. And, I just decided to not participate at all in the universe. Well, about a year later, it was early morning. Yeah, because you never knew what time it was because I lived in total darkness. There was no light. And you couldn't tell if it was morning, noon, or light in Arizona. I mean, it's hard to get away from the sun here. And I didn't have cable. I just had antenna. Only got 3 channels. And I was watching this talk show. And I wasn't really into it, but it was something that was on. And then at the corner of the living room, I started seeing what looked like sparklers, beautiful, like clear white diamonds sparkling in the corner. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and got about 3 feet wide, maybe about a foot tall, like a rectangle. And I thought, oh my God, that's an electrical fire in the house. What am I going to do? I can't go outside. So I'm just kind of looking at it, and then all at once there's these 2 voices come out of it. And it sounded like executives, very well-educated young executives, maybe 26, 27, 28-year-old business people chewing me out. And they kind of took turns and said, this has got to stop. We have such important work to do. We have so much important work that is assigned to us and has to get done, and you're stopping it. You're interfering in what we need to do, and we're not putting up with it anymore. They just told me off. And then the other one would pipe in, had a slightly different voice. I instinctively knew it was my 2 boys. They died 7 and 9 a year prior. Now they're like executives in their 20s, near, 25 to 30. And they're just saying, oh, we can't do this. This is so important what we're doing, and you're screwing it up. We're not tolerating this anymore. You have got to stop. You have got to let us go because you are holding us back. You have no idea what damage that you're doing. This work is so important, and it's not getting done, and it's your fault. And they just kept telling me off. And it's like I got pulled over by a mean cop. It's like, oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I miss you. I love you. You were everything to me, and you're gone in a flash. The only nice thing one of them said was, we appreciate what you did. That was it. and everything else was berating me. You are messing this up. This is so important, and you're destroying it just because of you. We're not tolerating anymore. You need to back off, and you need to back off now. And told me, oh, yes, 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 I'll do it. I'm sorry. I had no idea. And the voices stopped. This like bar of gorgeous glittering diamonds and sparks got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and it stopped. And I'm just, looking around, like, what the heck was that? It was them. And so I got up and I took a shower and shaved and trimmed my hair some, and I had to call someone to come jump my car because I hadn't started it in a year. And I drove to the nearest hospital and went in, back then, before computers really, and filled out a job application. And they started orientation the next day. And, my manager had moved off. She would have hired me back again. They knew who I was. Everybody knew me. It's like, well, sure, start tomorrow. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So I can't believe I got through that. Normally I can't get through this. So
that's incredible.
If they had come back and were a huggy and kissy and kept saying, Daddy, Daddy, we miss you, we love you, I would have just stayed crumbled. But they came back and told me off. Whatever work that they're doing in spirit, whatever goes on there, it's important work. I just don't think you're floating around playing harps and, feathers flapping around. There's something going on there. The life and personality and individuality continue. I don't think we become one big mass of something, but we maintain our individuality as we go on. And they matured, and they were so eloquent with their speech and sounded like adults. It was absolutely life-changing for me. And going through that experience, I decided I was such a technical nurse before. I just really wanted to love and support and uplift my patients. So I quickly, then moved into hospice, where I get to touch and hold and hug and cry with my patients and their family members. This completely changed my paradigm of who I was, what I'm doing here, and what I can do with my RN degree. And then I went on to 17 years of hospice because of that. I couldn't protect my children, but maybe I can protect somebody else. Maybe I could, I couldn't make my kids' last moments on earth any more pleasant, but maybe I can make it for somebody else's kids. And that changed my direction. It's not just about pills and needles and, and stethoscopes, but it's hugging and uplifting and smiling and being quiet and listening to them tell their stories. So completely changed the way I became a nurse. And how I saw the world and how I saw myself in it. And the interesting thing was I learned about the light and this incredible design, divine sense of spirit that flows from it, wherever it is and whatever it is, through each and every one of us, no matter what. You can't block it out. You can paint over your windows. You can shut your eyes. You can turn your head. You can refuse to participate with this divine light, but it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. You can't separate yourself from it because it's a part of who we are, not just our physical bodies, but that which is eternal. So as quickly as it was a year prior to spread all that paint using a little tiny razor blade, it took me like a year to scrape all of that paint off. And I wouldn't let my friends help me because this is part of my healing. This is a part of the process.
Wow.
I am never going to turn my back on the light. I'm going to be a willful participant and a co-worker with this divine light. So it was with pleasure and sore fingers that I scraped massive windows all over the house. I
Wow.
scraped every single bit of that paint off. And what a pleasure it was. And what a lesson I got out of that. I'm never turning my back on it again. You can't. You
Wow.
absolutely can't. It's there. It's lifting you up. It's loving you every single second. And if you feel like it's not, it's just because you've painted over your window. Scrape the paint off. It's there. You can choose to be a living headstone, or you can choose to be a stepping stone. And that's kind of what I got out of that. It's just mourning doesn't do anything. Healthy missing someone, that's okay.
Yeah.
And so freeing them, they needed to be free from me, gave me the freedom from my own attitude. And what a blessing that was. Absolutely wonderful. I am so grateful that that happened to me. And I got to see my boys, and they're doing fine.
Yeah. I love the term.
Since.
I love the term. Okay. So you hadn't nothing. Okay. Well.
And I don't pull them back.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes, sirs.
They have work to do. They're busy, right? they're busy. They're important. They're
See you later. When
Yeah.
my times come, I'm sure it'll be different.
I did want to let you talk real quickly about your YouTube channel. So you do have a YouTube channel. The name of the channel is Uncle Dave's Kitchen, but like we've talked about, you haven't done any kind of cooking content yet. But is that a passion of yours? Are you like have you always kind of been into food and cooking, and like how did the name kind of manifest?
It I was raised on a farm. I mean, we had chickens. We cooked chickens. We ate chickens and eggs, and we had flour. We made noodles out of chicken eggs and flour and the chicken. So I've always been interested in cooking. And one nice thing about in the hospice, especially when I was doing night shift, we had a kitchen, and I worked in actually 3 different hospices. The last 2 had kitchens, and at night shift, when we'd be taking care of our patients, because the families are just terrified. It's a house of death. Everybody's afraid to come to hospice. And here we are, we're nice people, but their family members have their backs against the wall. Grandma's dying, mom's dying, somebody's dying. What do we do? How do we act? Am I going to freak? Am I going to cry? What are people going to think of me? So, we're trying to relax the family members too. So, so we may have 10 dying patients, but we also have, 20 family members freaking out. So we would go around and take care of each patient and turn them and bathe them and give them the meds. And then when we're done, we'd have some time to do some charting and something. But I would go into the kitchen and I would start making cinnamon rolls. I was famous for my cinnamon rolls. So, you make and it's got to rise. So once I got the dough going, we'd go around and take care of all our patients again. And I'd go back and roll them out and cut them into rolls, and they got to rise again. And then we go around and take care of all our patients again. And then I would bake the cinnamon rolls. And I worked night shift. They were generally done by 2 or 3 in the morning. And the family members were, well, that smells good. I wonder what that is. And we'd put on a couple pots of coffee, and we would feed the families. If our patients could eat, they could certainly have some too. But it just brought the families together. And, food does such wonderful things to open up the heart and open up conversation and talking and healing. And then the family started supporting each other. I didn't, they weren't so reliant on us, because now they're having coffee. Want some more icing on that? I make big bowls of icing. It just became a thing. And so I was famous for years making Uncle Dave's. I always call myself Uncle Dave's cinnamon rolls. Well, one time I went down to Dallas, Texas. There was a bunch of motivational speakers, and I don't know, Zig Ziglar was there, Jim Rohn. A bunch of famous old-time motivational speakers were there. And this one guy who was becoming a professional speaker spoke up, and he was talking about his grandfather dying. and how, he was a boy and he was freaking out and his parents were freaking out. And one night, in the middle of the night, they smelled cinnamon rolls. And here it was. I was the nurse that night taking care of this man's grandfather in Mesa, Arizona. He was from somewhere and speaking in Dallas, and he was actually talking about me. And it was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
And he said, that he was a boy and he loved his granddad and he was missing him. And he said, it just completely changed his attitude and his fear about death by smelling the cinnamon rolls. And his mom said, hey, let's go get something to eat. And they did. And they sat around the table and all these other family members came out and they all sat around and talked and shared their stories about their dying loved ones. And he used that in his motivational speech.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And after the seminar was over, I went up to him and he kind of recognized me. Where do I know you from? And I said, I'm the cinnamon roll nurse. So,
jeez, what are the odds? I mean, really? Yeah.
And I did an interview once and somebody else recognized me and said, ask him if he's the nurse that made cinnamon rolls.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's like 25 years ago that this all went down. So anyway, I planned on doing a cooking show when I retired. And I am having so much trouble editing. So that's why I haven't even done a biscuit yet. But a friend of mine, a very nice man, is editing my spirit stories. Mm-hmm. So that's what it is. So I'm just going to keep on Uncle Dave's Kitchen. Maybe I'll get to cook.
We look forward to it. I know I do. And I think the cinnamon rolls will have to be like a seminal episode, right?
Uncle Dave's hospice cinnamon rolls. I hope everybody's going to want one of those, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I've really appreciated you being so open and sharing everything about your life and and being so generous with your time. So
thank you so much. I'm sorry I'm not scary, but
we went up and down quite a few different topics, and that's awesome. So I think it's kind of in the eye of the beholder.
Bye, everybody.